I think the first is to be really thoughtful around the type of growth you're able to achieve that won't burn your people out, that will allow you to serve your customers, beat your competition, thrive in the industry, but also allow you to nurture the goose and get the golden eggs.
Welcome to the Modern Selling Podcast, where we help the entire sales community to create more sales conversations with today's modern buyer. This includes anyone from entrepreneurs and business owners to sales reps and sales leaders. Each episode, you will hear from sales leaders, practitioners, and influencers to help you find, engage, connect, and nurture your relationships with your buyers. I'm Mario Martinez Jr., your host, and you're now listening to the Modern Selling Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of the Modern Selling Podcast. And for all of you who are coming in live on Facebook, thank you for joining us. I've got with me a very, very, very special guest. I was excited to have reached him and said, will you please join me on this podcast? I've got Mr. Scott Miller, the Executive Vice President of Thought Leadership at FranklinCovey. And we got a really awesome title and a really awesome role. Scott, welcome to the show, man.
Mario, thanks for the invite. Happy to be here.
Now, this whole cool title, like I want it when I grow up, I want to be whatever the front is, the top, something executive, anything of thought leadership. Like that is so freaking cool. What does it do? What does it mean?
You know, I'm in my 25th year with the FranklinCovey company. I started in sales, frontline salesperson, moved my way up into the organization, was the chief marketing officer for 8 years. And now I am, to your jealousy, the executive vice president of thought leadership. Here's what that means. You know, thought leadership really, Mario, is the new public relations, right? Most organizations now don't have a team of PR people calling up journalists and newsrooms trying to get press. Nobody's left. There are no journalists left in newsrooms. There's no newsrooms left for the most part, certainly in local papers. So thought leadership now is really about articulating your point of view, right? Your expertise, and making sure that all those people out there that care or should care know about it. So as the EVP of Thought Leadership, my job is to make sure that FranklinCovey's expertise around sales performance, executing strategy, building a high-performance culture, building relationships, is out there amongst all those senior vice presidents of sales, CHROs, VPs of organizational development, anybody that's in a role to build human performance, to change human behaviors, whether it be through keynotes, podcasts, interviews, publishing our books, our digital books, our columns in weekly magazines. I lead the team that does all of that, and I have joined that group of thought leaders. I can't call myself a thought leader. You can call me that if you choose. But I've joined that now as the author of 2 books and some columns and things like that. So it's been a great run. And I'm honored to be part of the FranklinCovey brand.
That's fabulous. So I love that idea of really being an evangelist, and you're taking the time and helping to develop, and all eyes are on you. And, you know, fortunate for someone like myself, I've also been privileged to be categorized as a thought leader in sales, in our sales category. And there's a lot of cool stuff that you get to do. And there's also a lot of pressure on you to always deliver some really great stuff and always be thinking of how to advance and help people to get to the next level. So congratulations on your success. 24 years, you said?
Yeah, almost 25. I'm going to slide into home base.
Yeah.
So 25 years.
You almost don't find that anymore at an organization.
You don't.
You'll be lucky if you get about 3 years, 4 years out of an individual. So that's awesome. And I'm sure it's been an amazing ride, especially having so many different diverse roles in the organization. So what I wanted to ask you, though, is something I ask all my guests on the Modern Selling Podcast. And I'm looking for something juicy, Scott. I'm looking for something juicy. So here we go. Tell us something nobody knows about you, even if they looked at all of your social profiles. Now, I've had extra appendage, illegal poker rings that paid their way through college. Running a pot ring. Like I had some really good stuff. So I don't know, but
I'm pretty clean. I'm pretty clean. You didn't say it had to be salacious. You just said it had to be something no one knew. I spent 2 years working for George H.W. Bush and Senator Quayle back in 1986 and 87 and 88, getting them elected to become the president and vice president. And spent a year with advanced work with Mrs. Bush back in the day. Got stuck in a few elevators with Senator Quayle. And that's not juicy. I don't talk about it. I'm very proud of it. A lot of people confuse George H.W. Bush with George W. Bush, his son. I have no negative comments to say about his son, but I think George H.W. Bush was an American patriot and hero, a man of impeccable integrity. I'm very proud to be associated with that family and that campaign and that presidential, success. So that's not as good as running a pot ring or gambling or extra appendage. I got a pretty clean life going on. I don't know.
So here's the problem. If I'm ever asked that question, I'm like, man, I don't have anything like that. I run a pretty, I'm just like straight and narrow. Like, I don't got anything crazy like that. But
I stole gum from like 7-Eleven in elementary school. Plenty of it, I'm sure.
Well, if we're making confessions, I did many years ago when I was in high school as an honor student steal a test.
Oh, I did that. Oh, we used to. Can I tell you? Since now we're getting real.
Now we're getting real.
I remember in 10th grade, we used to have a course called in Florida. I'm from Florida. The mandatory course was called AVC. AVC. Americanism versus communism.
Oh, wow.
Honestly, it was required by law. I'm not even sure what Americanism is.
Right.
But the professor, if you call him the teacher, his name was Mr. Johnson. He always left his briefcase open on his stool. So like 5 of us guys would always go to the store and buy a not appropriate magazine and throw it in his briefcase when he wasn't looking, day after day after day, all year long. You think he would have closed his briefcase, damn it. Okay, well, so now we're getting crazy.
But the problem is he probably closed the briefcase and took it with him.
No, damn straight. Yeah.
Are you kidding me? You were making him happy.
I didn't. Yeah, I'm sure it was Business Week. I think it was Business Week. Yes.
Exactly. That's funny. Well, I still have guilt over my 11th grade test stealing, and it just I can't get it off my conscience. It's been there for a long time.
Dude, you got to join the Catholic faith. Go to confession and get rid of it, bro. It's a good thing.
10 Hail Marys, 3 Our Fathers,
You're done. You're done.
I love it. Well, one of the other things that I love about you as well, Scott, is not only are you, the EVP of Thought Leadership, but also you're a book author and best-selling book author. Yep. The last 2 books, Management Mess to Leadership Success, and then the recent one, which was actually back in October, right. Everyone Deserves a Great Manager, 6 Critical Practices for Leading a Team.
Right.
And I want to take some time to kind of transition into this topic. There's a lot of leaders that listen into the Modern Selling podcast, and we've got a lot of sales individuals who listen in as well, who want to aspire to be in leadership. And some people, they're very happy making the money that they're making in sales, and hopefully they're making great coin, right? We also have marketing leaders who listen in, sales enablement leaders who are listening in as well. And then, of course, business owners, small business owners, and some of them solopreneurs. But at the end of the day, leadership can be easy. It could be tough. You could have moments of toughness, especially in this COVID-19 era that we've been living in. It has been an interesting ride for even myself as the CEO of Ingresso, where we've had to make tough decisions, changes, moves, ads, those types of things. So talk a little bit about the basis of, if we can just go back to the latest book, Everyone Deserves a Great Manager. What was the inspiration behind Everyone Deserves a Great Manager? Just give me that first.
Right. So I've spent the better part of my entire 30 years in the leadership business. And for the sake of ease, I'll use the word leadership and management today interchangeably. We both know there are some differences, and people can sometimes get hooked up a little bit on the differences. Today, let's use them interchangeably. Here's why we wrote the book. After 40 years in business, Franklin Covey's learned a thing or two, right, about leadership.
You would think, yeah.
Right? The largest leadership development firm in the world. Certainly, in my opinion, the most credible. And about 3 years ago, Harvard Business Review published a study that Mario said the average age that someone is promoted into their first management role is age 30. But yet the average age they receive their first formal leadership development training, age 42.
Oh.
So you've got people that are well-intended, that are wreaking havoc across organizations for 12 years because they really don't know what to do. I mean, it's a classic case of most of us, right? Most of us were promoted into a management or leadership role because we were the most efficient dental hygienist or the most effective, creative digital designer, or we were the top salesperson, right? I mean,
Right.
most people listening were like me. I was the top salesperson, quarter in, quarter out in my division, 4 or 5 years. I get tapped on the shoulder. All of a sudden, I'm the sales leader. And now I am trying to turn people into my clone. I have these skills. You need to have these skills. Here's how I do it. When in fact, the first role of a manager, the first role of a great leader is to develop a leader's mindset. And we wrote this book because we really wanted to help people change their mindset. You know, the old common mindset is I achieve results on my own, which is what you did as an independent producer.
Sure.
The new mindset is, in fact, I get work done with and through other people. Let me repeat that. The new mindset is I get work done with and through other people. So what we found is there were so many leaders and managers, including in sales and marketing, that were good people. They just didn't really know how to lead. They didn't understand that what I did as an individual producer may have been extremely valuable. That may have no correlation to what I should be doing now in leading people.
Right.
I wish, Mario, someone had sat me down in my first transition from being top salesperson to being sales leader and said, hey, Scott, here's a T-chart. Here's 9 things you kick it at, right? You crush it at these 9 things. Hey, Scott, tomorrow, you got to stop doing 6 of them because they're not going to work for you as a sales leader. And Scott, over here, here's 9 things that you actually don't do very well right now. In fact, Scott, you don't do them at all. And you're going to need to learn to do these things immediately next week, next month, next quarter to be a sales leader. No one told me that. I just took all the things that I thought would work hitting my goal, and I foisted them onto everybody else, and I imploded time and time again until I began to realize what got me here is not going to get me or them there. So we wrote this book as a practical, relatable guide to say, you know what? After 40 years, if you do these 6 things and you do them even reasonably well, you're going to have a remarkable impact on your company's legacy, on your own legacy, reputation, but more importantly, to build capacity and capability in those who report to you, which is the goal of every leader.
Sure. Now, what you described earlier, average age of 30, you're promoted into management, but not until the age of 42 that you actually get training on how to lead people.
Yeah.
Man, even myself personally, it's the school of hard knocks. You trial and test it, right? What works? Learning how to adjust to different personalities, how to manage different situations, how to not push yourself and your thought process on a sales process and a sales opportunity as we think about sales, or could be related to any other position as well. It's so true, but why is it that so many companies make this mistake, and why is it that the cycle doesn't seem to end? Because I'll be honest with you, we even have folks in our organization. As soon as you said that, I was like, shoot. I've been meaning to get folks to get additional training on how to be a better leader, including myself. Like, I'm not immune to that at all either, right? But we put them in these positions. They prove themselves. They get the title, and we say, go be successful and watch what I do, and away we go. It seems like it's a cycle that continues itself. Why?
I think there's a couple of systemic issues we all can address. One is, I think the pressure for growth is, especially in public companies, is crushing, right? We all have this sort of urgency addiction where we have to grow exponentially, and that we don't really take the time to be efficient and effective. We have this sort of efficient enterprise running, but we don't slow down a bit and realize that you don't teach behavior change overnight. People aren't telepathic.
Yeah.
That in organizations, the need to grow and to have significant income earnings and EBITDA, we often chase, the golden egg, but we're not willing to actually groom the goose, so to speak, right? We crush the goose, trying to get all the eggs out faster and faster, and they got all the eggs, but the goose is dead. It's easier said than done. I'm a sales leader, have been for 20 years. I understand the need to perform, especially as an officer in a public company. Very little forgiveness, right? I mean, we'll get on a forecast or an earnings call, and we'll give some guidance, and all of a sudden, the analysts will go off the ranch and create some number that has nothing to do with what we said. And now if we miss it, we miss it. So now we have to go back and scramble and do all kinds of things, legal, ethical, to try to get there. I think the first is to be really thoughtful around the type of growth you're able to achieve that won't burn your people out, that will allow you to serve your customers, beat your competition, thrive in the industry, but also allow you to nurture the goose and get the golden eggs. There's got to be a transition figure. There's got to be someone sane in the organization that says, We cannot get better results if we don't invest in our people and groom them and role play and train and educate them and sophisticate their sales. It requires you to slow down and really recognize, are you being efficient at the cost of being effective?
Yeah, very good point. So as an individual, you get promoted into a leadership role.
Yeah.
One of the very first things that I did was help me be a better leader. Like that's what I said. But I've met many of folks who have not asked that question, right?
Yeah.
That self-awareness, that what do I need to do to be able to be better? So we know that this is a problem in many organizations, large and small. And I just confess, in all my corporate history from all the Fortune 100s that I've worked for, same problem. Mid-tier company, same problem. Small company, and I'm the CEO of it. Same problem. So what should I do in terms of saying, all right, if my company is promoting me at age 30 and I'm not being trained till 12 years later, right, on how to be a better manager, what should I do to step out of this and break the cycle? And where do I go to get help, as an example? And of course, we can talk about picking up the book, no doubt.
Yeah. I think a couple of quick things. One is just really recognize your self-awareness. Are you self-aware? We talk about this. We hear about self-awareness. None of us are as self-aware as we think we are, right? We have bravado, we have egos. And so I think one is really checking your ego and recognizing what are your strengths and what are your areas of growth, listening to your team. Some of these things sound cliche-ish, but this is so vital. The leader is the linchpin of culture in any organization. People don't quit their jobs. They quit bad bosses and corrupt cultures.
Yeah.
So as a leader, the first thing I think you should do is recognize that your job is to recruit and retain quality talent, people who are more talented than you. And that requires you to be vulnerable. It requires you to be humble. It requires you to recognize your job is not to be the smartest person in the room. Your job is not to be the genius. Your job is to be the genius maker of others, to be the igniter of talent in other people. So when you really reflect on that, if your job is not to be the smartest person in the room, your job is to recruit and retain quality talent, and then to give people feedback on their blind spots, to acknowledge your own blind spots. I wrote the book, Management Mess, Leadership Success, because I think great leaders are those that own their mess. First thing I think you ought to do when you're promoted, sit down and say, I'm excited and I'm scared. I don't have all the answers. I'm probably not any more or less competent than you all broadly across all the things. I do some things well. I do some things not well. I'm going to set the kind of culture where you can tell me what you think I do well, what I don't do well. I'll be open to that. I'm responsible for the results of this team, and I intend to help all of us achieve those. Every one of you is on a different path. I'm going to do my best to treat you all fairly while still treating you differently. Because some of you have different skill levels, different fears, different passions, different strengths. So I think checking your ego and checking your paradigm, where you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to be the expert, but you are responsible for building a culture where they should perform, where they learn, where they grow, where they admit their mistakes. You know, Mario, when I was the sales leader of our Chicago division, I had 17 salespeople reporting to me. Each of them had, on average, $1 million goal, which in high tech isn't very much, but in intellectual property, it's a big number. A lot of air to sell, right? It's $1 million a year. And one of my biggest mantras was, bad news is acceptable. Wrong news is not acceptable.
Wait, repeat that again.
Bad news is acceptable, but wrong news is not acceptable.
What does that mean?
When you give me wrong news, it means you're lying. You're making it up. You're phoning it in, right? Wrong news is, my pipeline has, $40,000 in A and $60,000 in B and $400,000 in C. And then it all falls out at the end of the quarter. That was wrong news, right? Bad news is the client isn't faxing in the contract like they told me they were going to last night. It's going to hit next quarter. That's bad news.
Right.
So as a sales leader, I think the biggest gift I gave to that division was making it safe to tell me the truth. Because as a sales leader, if people are lying to you, that says more about you than it does about them. If they're not telling you the truth about their pipeline, about their contracts, about their close rate, that means you've not made it safe for you to come and tell them the truth. Now, I never laid over and just, took the bad news all day long, but I
Right.
created a culture where I encourage people, as soon as you learn bad news, you got to tell me immediately, because the longer you string it out and try to be the hero on your own, the more you back me into a corner. And if you wait 2 or 3 or 4 days to spring this bad news on me, then you've cut off all my options. As a sales leader, I can't call anybody else in the region and try to pull in a deal. This was transformative in our culture, allowing salespeople to bring me bad news. Now, when you brought me bad news, oh, we're going to have a conversation. I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to curse. I'm not going to scream. I'm not going to humiliate you, but we're going to talk through and deconstruct where did it go wrong and where could you have ascertained earlier on that it was going wrong and then told me, because maybe I could have come and helped. Maybe somebody else could have come and helped. Maybe we could have had lunch with the client. Or if it wasn't salvageable, I would have said, I get it. You're right. It's going south. Now I've got 5 days to figure out where to get the revenue from some other place to hit our goal. Yeah. Anyway, I went off on a tangent there, but I think it's a valuable part of a leader is to develop that culture.
Yeah, well, I love what you said. Bad news is acceptable. Wrong news is not acceptable.
Right.
Right.
To me, wrong news just tells me you didn't pay the price to learn the process. You didn't understand the client's decision-making process. You didn't really ask the right questions on what their needs were. You weren't forecasting properly. These are things that should never repeat themselves.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Sometimes it gets back down, especially in sales, it gets back down to the basics. This is where I think a lot of sales leaders are really challenged by, because we look at a deal and someone forecasts it, it hits a certain level, it's above 50% or whatever the number is internally, whatever the metric is, it gets on somebody's radar screen, they forecast it, and then they put a percentage of all the dollars that they see that are rolling up to what's really going to happen, and then that gets chopped, and then it keeps going up, right? And so, but you think about this, it's like if there was that one deal that was going to make your number, if you as an individual rep, one deal that was going to make your number, now you got to sit back and you got to be thinking about, what is it going to take to win this deal? Who's going to sign this contract? Is there budget? Who else needs to approve this? And sometimes we get so excited about the opportunities that we forget to go back to the basics. And if you look back at almost every deal that you lost, it was because you didn't follow the basics. And this is not necessarily a rep problem. It oftentimes is a leadership problem. And the leaders have not built the appropriate playbooks to be able to help the rep to remember.
Amen.
We had so many things that we're thinking about in a conversation. We're managing the customer, we're managing the conversation. We're seeing which direction. We're trying to forecast what question should I ask next? What solution is the right solution that we're going to forget. So build your playbooks around that help support and your sellers. And if you're having those types of problems, then enable the sellers, enable the whoever it is. And I think this is a systemic problem in the whole industry as a whole, that 57% of sellers are making quota every year. Like, this is a bigger problem than what it is. But going back on this line of sales leadership, or leadership in general, about not being the smartest person in the room, we hear that all the time. We hear looking for the person. Now, it's interesting. We just recently brought on board someone to head up our digital marketing. And I feel like I'm pretty savvy on this digital marketing stuff, right? But now we've moved past this. We've had this big, giant database cleanup project, Scott. And we're almost done. I'm at the point now where it's like, all right, now we got to focus on conversion, right? We have tens of thousands of visitors to our website. People are all interested in digital this. And so now my messaging has changed from here, we need to fix this problem, to, guys, what's next? Here's my ideas that I've got that you've told me that we need to fix. How are we going to fix that? I'm not the smartest guy in the room. What do we do next? What is your solution? What's your strategy? Give me those ideas and let's start working on these things. I think that's what you're talking about in terms of like looking for others to help you in the organization. Not, this is what we need to do. This is where we need to go. This is how we need to get there. Correct?
Emphatically correct. I mentioned I was the chief marketing officer for 8 years for the firm, and at the same time, the executive vice president of business development. So my job was to keep the pipeline full and also manage the brand globally. I'll tell you, I'm 51 now. I'll be almost 52 in a few months. And it was really till I was about 49, Mario, that I learned this transformative leadership principle. And it came from reading Liz Wiseman's book called Multipliers. I
Mm-hmm.
highly recommend this book. Liz is a former chief learning officer de facto at Oracle for 20 years, wrote a seminal book called Multipliers. Cannot recommend it enough to your listeners and viewers today. And it was after I read this book from Liz that I realized, as the chief marketing officer, I felt like I had to be the most creative, the most disciplined, the most educated, the most proficient at SEO and marketing automation and Marketo and MQLs and all of that. And so as a result of it, I tended not to hire people that were smarter around me. I hired people who I thought were sufficiently smart, who were talented, that I could get along with, but I was a little bit fearful to be eclipsed by them. So I had a bit of an epiphany in my late 40s. Some might say 20 years later than necessary, where I realized I had been holding back the organization because I was too insecure about making sure that I was finding the absolute star in the nation around Marketo, right? And the star ninja Salesforce person and someone who knew marketing automation and Salesforce, you get it, all of that. So that was a big learning for me. As a sales leader, your job's not to be the best salesperson. That's not your job. Your job is to really, like I said before, recruit, retain talent, put systems in place, coach, mentor, be patient, exit people when it's the wrong fit for them, or if you're the wrong fit for, they're the wrong fit for you. It's you mentioned earlier that sometimes leadership can be easy. I don't think leadership's ever easy. I think leadership sucks most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the executive vice president of the world's most profound leadership firm. Leadership is not for everyone.
True.
Not everyone should be a leader. I think too often we lure people into leadership roles, into sales leadership roles.
That shouldn't be there.
That shouldn't be there. And you know what?
Right.
I think the industry, the leadership industry, has shamed people. Of course, you have to be, the only way to move up, the only way to build your career is to become a sales leader. And all of a sudden, people have had a great career being an individual producer. Now they become a sales leader and they realize my job is half the time having high courage conversations, talking to people about their skills, firing people, hiring people, coaching people, late nights thinking about how am I going to let this person go, right? Leadership is not for everybody. Just like not everyone should be an anesthesiologist. Not everybody should be a commercial airline pilot. Not everybody should be a sales or marketing leader. And I feel no shame that I'm not a commercial airline pilot.
You're right.
Why do we treat sales leaders any different than you would a pilot, right? It takes a lot of training, a lot of discipline. Pilots go through training all the time to keep their skills going.
That's exactly right. Well, and I would also say the same thing about being a salesperson as well, right? It's the exact same principle. We got to go through training to be able to hone in that skill. You know, it's interesting. We haven't even gotten into some of the 6 critical practices. Maybe you are. I don't know any one of the 6 specifically. And if you're touching on any of these ones, but I'll tell you about a scenario.
Hey, I'm in marketing. Of course, I've been touching on them.
All right. Okay, I'm assuming that you are. But there was a recent. So we just brought on a new Salesforce. We have I've always used a very methodical process to hiring what I thought was the best talent. It's a series of at least 4 interviews.
Yep.
And we go through that interview process, and step 1 is so and so, step 2 is such and such, step 3 it's me, and then we go through what's called a panel interview for salespeople. And in that panel interview process, we bring in about 6 people on the panel, and we give a real world sales simulation. And it's a 45-minute interview, 30 minutes of which is them presenting 5 minutes of introductions and 5 minutes of Q&A, or 10 minutes of Q&A, 10 minutes of Q&A. And so what we do is we basically have this sheet, and we go through 3 major sections. We're all on a Google sheet, and we give the assignment. We say, you got 3 things to present in 30 minutes. 3 things, that's it. That generally means if you want to use slides, it's 3 slides. 1, why you? 2, why Vengresso, as if you were selling it to a customer. And 3, a teachable moment. Tell us something you're passionate about. Teach us something, right? Because if you foul up on 1 or 2, we at least want to get you the saving grace on number 3, and let's see your presentation skill. Let's see how everything comes through, right? So we do this, and we bring in people from customer success, from our marketing team, and from our sales organization. And everybody gets a say in this whole process. And what that does is it allows us to be able to see pressure inside of a virtual environment, the selling process, what you do, how you lead a conversation. Did you open? Did you introduce? Did you go through the close or at the end? Did you ask if there's any problems or issues? Did you ask for the job? Like all this simulation. And then we hire based upon that simulation. Now, some people One person in an interview process basically made an individual feel stupid. And that one thing is what killed their interview, right? Because everybody just honed in on like, oh man, I don't want to work with this individual, right? So that recently happened. And then we hired a bunch of other guys. So we hired these guys and they're all phenomenal and awesome. And now we get into, all right, now we're going to coach. So here's a real life situation. And I want to talk about this going back to this area of retaining and recruiting quality talent, right? To make them better. That's what you said, make them better. So this is a real life situation. Sales rep books a call. They asked me to join them because it's an executive level conversation. So executive asks a question and I very easily could answer the question. The sales executive, who's new, Sebastian in this case, is less than a month on the job, or about a month on the job. He's sitting back, he's waiting, for me to answer the question. And I said, that's a really good question. Sebastian, why don't you take that one? Man, you should have saw the guy's look. You should have saw Sebastian's look. I'm sure he peed in his pants right there at that moment in time, but he handled it phenomenally. And he answers a question and he gives his answer, but he knows it's not complete. So what does he do? He perfectly punts back to me and says, Mario, do you have any additional thoughts? And so I knew exactly where he was going. And I was like, it was perfect. And afterwards he was like, man, I can't believe you put me on the spot. But I was like, you got to fly. You got to get out of the nest. I can't be there as a CEO on your calls, right? So you got to do this. So we talk about like the whole process of coaching people up in an organization. Is that an example of what we're talking about in terms of hiring the right talent and then coaching them to success? Or what other tips do you have that could help sales leaders think through whether you're hiring a salesperson, a sales manager, a director, a VP, whatever it might be?
I think it's a beautiful setup to revisit one of these practices, and I mentioned it before, which is to develop a leader's mindset. I think it's very tempting, Mario, for sales leaders to rush in and save the day. And I think a lot of unsophisticated sales leaders would do that. What separates you from those is you were building capacity. You weren't trying to hang the guy. You know what? You would have helped. You would have saved.
Absolutely.
Maybe not saved the day, right? Sometimes those flash moments are pivotal points in people's career, right?
That's right.
I think the most important role that a leader plays once you have recruited and retained talent is this constant level of feedback and coaching. And it never stops. It never stops. I mean, your job as a leader is to enable, is to grow, is to pollinate, and to build. And I think leaders have got to be really mindful of, do you make that a priority? Here's a good example. I love a good crisis. Like, I thrive best in crisis. I like to save the day. I like the dopamine. I love to do my best work under pressure. Yeah. And you know what? If one doesn't exist, I'll cook one up.
Oh, well, yeah, you got to make it. You got to
totally.
Make it.
I'll elevate something that's not a crisis into a crisis so that I can get my adrenaline going, right?
Exactly. If we're not doing drugs, we might as well get the dopamine effect going.
It's so true. And some people will think I'm a fraud. No, I'm a human. And I think a lot of us do this but don't acknowledge it, right? I love a good crisis and I will go cook one up if one doesn't exist. The reason I say that is I think it's more common than not for leaders, sales leaders of any type, to build these urgency addicted environments. Even if you're not the problem, it might be your boss, it might be the boss's boss, right? And you've got to have the discipline and the patience and the maturity to separate you and your team out of that and take the time to coach and educate and mentor. It was interesting. I was with my CEO a couple of years ago, and we were up in a meeting with a world-renowned expert in Boston on developing sales teams. And this expert was telling us around the indisputable value of face-to-face meetings and how we had to exponentially budget for and and schedule face-to-face meetings. And in this interview, I was listening. I'd have been in the firm for, at that point, 18 years. And I made the comment that was not acknowledged or validated by anybody when I said, it doesn't matter how many face-to-face meetings you have. If we're not training and educating our people on what to do with that meeting, it doesn't matter. People Absolutely. Can be on 30 hours of face-to-face meetings, but if they don't know what they're doing, it's a huge waste of money. And I tell you, I think it was sort of the emperor has no clothes. Is that the analogy?
Yeah.
Because these super billionaire people thought I was an idiot in the room. I was precisely right. Yes, we should exponentiate our face-to-face meetings, but instead of putting money into travel this year, let's put the first half of the money in developing our people and role-playing them and perfecting them on our solution. And as you were earlier talking about this concept of thinking everything is a sale, I call it happy years, right? We hear a deal and we think it's done, but how to peel the onion and how to ask the right questions and how to make sure that our salespeople are as invested in their client success as they are our success. I once heard an expert sales author say how you can tell a great salesperson. First, ask them what is their quarterly goal. $194,000. Who's your biggest client? Ace Automotive. What's their quarterly goal? And if they can tell you, hire them, promote them, give them more quota, give them more territory, right? When your salesperson knows their client's problems and goals, as well as they know yours, you've hit a pivot point. So I think your podcast is phenomenal. I mean, I'm learning a lot on there on this as well. We need to take more time, step out of the whirlwind, and make sure you are investing in your people. It sounds like a cliche, but it will pay you dividends. Now, you got to fly the plane while you're changing out the engines, right? And you can't stop the plane. You can't stop, business. You got to do it in real time oftentimes, but you'll see the benefit, no question, when you invest in your people.
I'll give you another story, Scott, and this goes back down to your leader's principle. So we're working on a very large contract, and we have our account executives, and our mission is to grow them, right? We've got SMB, mid-market, and enterprise. So we've got some really phenomenal guys, and they happen to all be guys in SMB. And we see the potential. Like, there's just some great raw talent there. And I think our interview process is pretty much killer. And we haven't had a failed person yet. And so after the first month out of the gate, we said, there's potential here. I'm going to start bringing them in to watch these big giant deals. Why? Because they have better potential in this mid-market segment for them and for us, no doubt, right? For them and for us. And eventually get into that strategic large enterprise sales. So let's teach them using our large enterprise sales. Now, it just happened to be the senior executive came to me because we have a relationship. So I started running the campaign. I don't try to, maybe one day I'll get big enough as a CEO and I have to have somebody else do it. But I always like to be in the field. I don't know. You just can't get me out of the field. Anyways, so this takes extra work, what I'm about to describe, right? A lot of extra work. But I've got the rep copied in on all email communications, everything going to legal, everything going to finance, everything going to insurance, industry, everything. And I'm expecting, in this case, Frank to read every single email and understand and watch the plays that are being made. Now, it's more than just that. It's more than just copying your rep on this to help them learn and grow that to that next skill level. What it requires is, in my opinion, and give me some coaching here, what it requires is to make application. Case in point, yesterday we got the red lines back from legal. I had already read the terms and conditions. I'd already gone through them and said, yes, no, no, yes. Oh, that's an interesting one. But then I get on the phone and I said, hey, did you read the red lines? Yeah, I took them. What's working, what doesn't? Well, I was going through this. I'm listening to his explanation. We should probably, I don't think we can. What do we know? And I want to understand his questions to see where he's thinking, to be able to understand how to formulate a deal,
right,
to risk, to pushing back to a customer, right? Because most reps are like, can't we just give it? Let's get it done, right? Pretty much 85% of the stuff that we were working on for this is stuff that we could easily push back on with an explanation. The key is do you understand the explanation of why we can't accept this? For example, like insurance requirements. You were asking me to get insurance as if I was a $50 million a year company. Guess what? I'm not, right? So I took the time. It was an hour-long conversation, going through each point, hearing the explanation, even though I already knew the answers, even though I already had a perspective, but I needed to hear him say it because I needed him to go through it. I needed him to talk it through. And the hard part about that for leadership development and growth is it takes time. And sometimes it's painful, man, because you're sitting there, you're like, I don't have the time. I got all these things I got to do. But is that the type of thing that we're talking about in terms of coaching and developing that leader's mindset as well?
You just described the role of a leader. I mean, it's unrelenting. It's repeatable. It's with every person. If you want to retain someone long-term and not be churning through people, you've got to somehow find the time to do what you just described. Because I think the best leaders are thinking about, how do I create capacity over time where that person then can coach someone else, right? Your job is constantly knowledge transfer and coaching and pushing back and mentoring. It's real time. It's not just once a quarter at offsite, right? It's what you just did. It's that, what's the highest use of my time right now? Is it to, go through the red lines with this gentleman or this lady, or is it to, put some other deal together? It's a constant tension.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the leaders that have built a culture of high performance are able to really calibrate and balance their time on where they spend it. And they're probably spending more of their time doing what you just described than probably anything else. Because otherwise your capacity is limited. You're going to be rushing in all the time, saving the day, doing it yourself, and then you'll become frustrated. And you'll become a martyr and a victim. And then your mentality, your mindset will be, well, no one is as smart as me. You'll be doing all of the work. And that's just cancerous.
I'm gonna give you a clap for that one. For all of you, if leaders are listening in, you cannot be the person to save the day. And that is not, ever since we started our company to be the world's largest modern sales training company, Scott, it's always been about duplicatable, replicatable, and scalable. And look, I love selling. Don't get me wrong. I love being in the field. But if I want to duplicate and replicate what I can do, I got to train the duplicates.
and it's easy for us to talk about it, right?
Yeah.
But it's also it's also understandable not to be naive or a Pollyanna, that people like you that own the company, they got their whole life on the line, right? They may have mortgaged their house, may have second mortgaged their house, they got loans, they got credit cards. It's easy for me to sit here and say, spend your time developing capacity, spend your time teaching someone about the red lines. Yeah. Yep. That's where you got to spend your time. Otherwise, you'll find yourself in the same position 7 months from now, burnt out, with a stroke, divorced, broke, and you won't have built any capacity to be able to scale yourself as well.
Or wait, worse yet, hold on. Let me turn around, Facebook Live friends, and those on the podcast. You can't see what I'm doing, but I'm going to show Scott. Hold on, Scott.
Gray hair?
No. Balding. I'm getting a bald spot.
Hardly.
That's when you know you have to let go, Scott.
You're
losing the hair. You
got some thick hair there. You can't even see the back. See the back. What is that?
That's because the hair is down to my mouth now. It's all brushed back. I slicked it back. Latin style. Get some grease inside there.
That's not a comb over. That's a comb back. That's acceptable. That's acceptable.
Exactly right. It's my comeback.
I love it.
Fabulous insights. I love what we've spent some time talking about, in terms of coaching leaders and getting back down to some of the basics, and really focusing on developing that leader's mindset. And I cannot say that I've done it perfectly, and I definitely know when I went into first line management, my very first time, boy, I could see that because I was managing big, large accounts, and I was like, oh God, let me just take over and let me fix this problem so we can close this deal and make the money.
And sometimes that's the right thing to do, right? I mean, as a business owner, I'm not going to choose booking a big multi-year enterprise deal over teaching someone a lesson and losing it. You got to calibrate. I mean, if I was a leader of a company like you, where my mortgage is dependent upon making the deal, you got to calibrate right? You may have to step in and close it and make that a teachable moment, right? It's all about just calibrating how you spend your time, when you save, when you coach, when you can set someone up, right, for success. Give them some rope, not enough to hang themselves, right? Just enough to make them a little uncomfortable.
That's right. Like we did with Sebastian. Well, I tell you,
yeah.
If you would have saw the video, just beads of sweat started happening right there.
I've been there. I once was at Ohio State University with my vice president, our biggest client in the education division, right? We had like 17 of our clients around a big table. And the vice president turned it over to me to do like a teaching session. He knew I couldn't compose like 9 words. I was on the job for like, a week or something. And he gave me about a minute and a half and then just graciously kind of like stepped beside me and took over, not entirely, but set me up. And he saved me. I'll never forget that, Chuck. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So I think my sales team has finally figured out, they're probably watching or will listen to this podcast. So they're watching the Facebook Live or they're going to listen to this podcast for sure. If they haven't figured this out yet, I'm going to drop it here. But hopefully they figured it out by now. Every time they invite me to a call, I show up unprepared. Okay, so hold on. So hear me out on this one. Now, of course, I do my standard 101. I'm going to look the individual up who I'm supposed to be talking to. I need to understand who I'm talking to, right? But when we come to this call, you better have done the homework. You better know how many sales reps they have. You better understand who all the different buyers are. You got to have your questions out. You got to have the playbooks open and ready and recording information. I'm not doing it, right? So here's a good one. So what I did was recently, we get on a call. We're going through. We're at the end. And I write an IM back or a private message on chat. And I say, what do I do next? Right? While the customer's talking, what do I do next? What happens next? And I'm waiting. And you know, John recently said, book the next meeting. And I said, perfect. What do I ask about who needs to be involved? And he's like, who needs to be involved? I was like, oh, dang it. I gave him the answer. Right? So then I'm like, do it. Right? Do it. Right. So that's that training. We got to take that mindset. And this is down into, you know, as a sales rep level. And then as you get up into leadership, you know, a great example is we just had a conversation with Yvonne. She's the head of our customer experience and success organization, customer experience, excuse me. And we were just talking about a strategy on new hires. And I said, well, what about this? Oh, I didn't think about that. Okay. What do you think we should do? Oh, well, I think, yeah. Okay. So these are the types of things that we just got to, as leaders, we have to start getting those wheels turning, because if I ever want to be sitting out on the boat right over here, Facebook can see me right now. Yes. Scott can see me. Podcasters, listeners, you can't see, but I got the water right out there. If I want to be on a boat with my cell phone and fishing or diving, I'm going to need people to take over the reins, man. I got to take over the reins. So listen, this has been a fabulous conversation, Scott. Super, super great conversation. If people want to get a hold of you or connect with you, what's the best way? Is it LinkedIn? Is it Twitter?
Yeah,
Instagram?
It's all those. It's hard not to find me. Just Google Scott Miller, Franklin Covey. Love to have you connect, follow on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. You also can go to FranklinCovey.com, find me, find the podcast I host, the books. I'm out there.
And we'll make sure we put all of Scott's social media links inside of the actual podcast show notes. And hopefully one day I'll have a chance to join your video podcast or what you've got going on over there, Scott. But what I would say is one last final question for you, my friend. Here it comes. Hard one. All-time favorite movie. What is it?
Damn. You know, can I tell you, I read 100 books a year.
Jeez.
I know. And so I've probably seen 10 movies in my life. So I'm going to have to dig deep on this one. I saw a movie that has never left me called The Devil's Advocate. Did you see that with Keanu Reeves?
No.
The movie like maybe 20 years ago where Al Pacino plays the devil. And Keanu Reeves is this up-and-coming corporate attorney in New York City trying to kind of balance his wife and family with the greed of corporate America and law. It's a haunting movie. And for some reason, it's never left my mind. Again, maybe it's because I've only seen 10 movies in my life, right? But I think I've seen Trolls 814 times. Does that count? I've seen Trolls.
Trolls, yeah.
That's a positive. Talk about the opposite of The Devil's Advocate, Trolls, right? So maybe I'll switch it to Trolls.
There you go. All right. Well, we got your all-time favorite movie. Appreciated having you. It's been great. I'll tell you, I'm not a book reader. I don't really have ADD. I don't think I do. A short content consumer. I probably read at least 2,000 blogs a year.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah.
Like videos, short video. The books, though, guess what I'm picking up, though?
Management Mess to Leadership Success.
Oh, well, that one, yes. And hopefully I'll get a signed copy from you.
Everyone deserves a great manager.
That's right. I'm going to get that book. Scott, been great having you on the show.
Thank you,
For all
Mario.
of you listening in right now, don't turn that dial. You've got this very important message right now.
Thanks for listening to the Modern Selling Podcast. Please do me a huge favor and give the Modern Selling Podcast a rating and review on iTunes. I would appreciate it. Also, if you want to easily find our show, just go to themodernsellingpodcast.com. Hey, since you'll be on our site, be sure to check out our Modern Marketing Engine podcast hosted by my co-founder and CMO, Bernie Borges. Thanks for listening in, and until the next episode, good selling.